Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. We are on another part for Witchlings. We left off at the beginning of chapter 10, which is called Witchlings on Toast. So before we begin, we're going to take a deep breath in. And begin. Vulcan! Screamed Valley, and a burst of flame erupted from her hands. There was blood coating the tips of Valley's hair and a gash on her hand. She had come flying from the top of a yellow train car, the waning sun lighting her up like a stained glass window. The sight of the blood had made Seven's stomach turn, her fear becoming desperate worry. For Valley. Valley! Cried Thorn and Seven in unison, running over to her. The biggest cuckoo howled as Valley's level 2 fire spell lit up all around it. The other two cuckoos weren't as lucky. The spell slashed across their spindly bodies, and they bolted behind another train car. I'm okay. Valley was already getting up, brushing snow and soil off her cape and black jeans. The snow beneath her was red. Are you hurt? Thorn asked. It's just a scratch on my hand, maybe one on my leg. I'm okay. But look. Valley's eyes narrowed, and Thorn and Seven turned to follow her gaze. The cuckoo was catching fire. Valley's spell had created a circle of molten lava around the monstro, and it was closing in on the cuckoo. Its enormous shoulders heaved up and down like it was having a hard time breathing. The monstro glared at them, baring its pointy teeth, saliva dripping from its open mouth. What now? Asked Thorn. We run before the other two recover. I got in some hits and slowed them down, but they're coming, said Valley. The last thing we want to do is kill all the night beast cuckoos. It'll be much harder to find it before it leaves hibernation if we do. We should have run in the first place, thought Seven, but Valley was hurt, and Seven's commentary wasn't going to help. Just as the witchlings began to make a run for it, the cuckoo shrieked loudly and ran through the lava straight at them. Fear prickled every inch of Seven's skin as the cuckoo, which was now very much on fire, growled and snapped just inches from their heads. Go, go, go! Yelled Valley. But in a flash, the other two cuckoos were on their heels as well. They're too fast! Screamed Seven. We can't fight them, said Thorn. Seven's legs burned as she ran, Thorn and Valley at her side. She looked back, and they were doing it. They were losing the cuckoos. Come on, we're almost in the clear, said Seven. Spoke too soon, said Thorn. The other two cuckoos rounded a corner, skidding and kicking up gravel and snow as they joined the first. They were bleeding in a few spots, but not on fire anymore, and much, much faster. They would never be able to outrun these two. Seven had to do something, and fast. She let Thorn and Valley pull ahead, gritted her teeth, and turned around, hands up. Viento! Seven, no! Valley said, but it was too late. A strong wind whooshed around them and pushed the two cuckoos nearest them back. They careened against the cuckoo that was on fire, and their fur caught like a well-oiled wick. Yes, said Seven, when the Viento spell rebounded and came back in her direction, bringing the fire with it. Oh, my goats! Seven turned to run when the fire caught the edges of her cloak. Ah! Valley screamed as fire lit up her pink hair. Thorn ran over to try and help when her own cape burst into flames. Now all three witchlings were on fire and running in circles, trying and failing at spells to put the fire out. Seven tried to think of how to put them all out at once. She briefly contemplated jumping it on the boggy Crone River before remembering it was frozen. Snow, she thought. Jump in the snow, she screamed, and lunged into an embankment of snow, putting the fire out. Thorn and Valley must have done the same, because the next thing Seven knew, the three witchlings were side by side, smoke rising from them as they sat up. The cuckoos, Seven said, panicked and scrambling to get to her feet. Chill, said Valley, look. From the embankment, they could see two piles of ash and large towers of smoke billowing in the wind. One of the cuckoos, the smallest, was dragging itself not in their direction, but in the direction of the woods, a trail of dark, gooey blood in its wake. They had somehow managed to kill 2 of the cuckoos, with the third on its way to meet the same fate, and now their plan was well and truly cooked. 7 began to cough. Her insides were too hot. Blow back. Something wet landed with a thump at 7's foot, and she jumped. "Edgar!" she cried, picking up the toad and kissing him without thinking. "So the rumors were true," said Valley. "This is no time for jokes. The cuckoos are gone, which means we can't follow them to the den," 7 said. "Now what?" She was lightheaded and exhausted, and her skin felt like it was on fire. She buried her head in her hands. "We're toast," said Valley, sounding defeated. Thorn's stomach rumbled loudly. Chapter 7. Light as a Feather. Somewhere between realizing the cuckoos were dead and the dread of their situation sinking in, 7 passed out right there in the snow. By then, some townsfolk had gathered near the scene of their battle, the fire from the cuckoo's charred and lifeless bodies creating a smoke signal. Not one of them stepped forward to help or see if the witchlings were okay. "Step aside!" The town grand's voice broke through the crowd. The town uncle held on to his furry green hat as he ran beside her and towards the witchlings. "What happened?" The grand picked 7's head up off the ground. She wasn't unconscious, but she was barely holding on. "Cuckoos, 3 of them. One was a mega cuckoo," Valley said. "Did any of them take a shoe or a sock?" the grand asked, as she cradled 7's head in her arms. She was reciting some sort of incantation between questions, probably something to give 7 strength. "No clothing. Right?" Valley asked Thorn. Thorn shook her head. "He did whack me into a train car and scratched us some, but that's it." "Good. That at least is good. Also, my hands." Valley held her hands out, and they were blistering and red. "Rulian!" the grand instructed the uncle as he rubbed something on Valley's burned palms. 7 was regaining a bit of strength now and began to cough. The grand pulled a vial of something green and murky looking from her cape. Drink quickly." She tipped the vial into 7's mouth, and the green sludge slithered down her throat like a family of worms. "I'm gonna barf," said 7 as she sat up. The world around her had lost its color. Everything looked gray and cloudy like a smudged watercolor painting. "What's happening to me? Everything looks weird," said 7. "By chance, have you been using any magic above your proficiency level?" asked the town uncle. 7 could feel her cheeks going hot, and she looked at Valley and Thorn, who were standing just off to one side of them, their eyes opened wide with fear. "That is very serious indeed," the uncle said. Just then, the grand broke into a coughing fit, sending the uncle into a panic. "Agua!" He conjured water, but forgot the glass, and it rained down on his furry green hat, making it look like wet moss. 7, do you think you can stand up?" the grand whispered. Her coughing fit had stopped abruptly, although the uncle was still fussing over her and oblivious to her suspicious recovery. "I think so," 7 said. The grand stood up, holding her hand out for 7. 7 planted one foot on the ground and then another, but when she grabbed the grand's hand and tried to get up, her legs gave out from under her and she tumbled to the cold, snowy ground. "We can carry her," Valley said, but the grand waved her away. "You're in bad shape yourself. You might have to see the witch doctor for those hands." 7 glanced over at her coven, and both Valley and Thorn looked like they had rolled around in a fireplace. Everything from their hair to their cheeks was covered in soot, and 7 had a feeling she looked just like them. The grand pulled her wand from her sleeve and pointed it at 7. Light as a feather. A small stream of white light shot from the wand, and 7 floated up, looking around in amazement as she did. She was enveloped in a softly glowing orb of light. It might be the closest she'd ever get to flying, she thought. "Follow me," the grand said to no one in particular, and they headed out in the direction of Twilight Square. "Are you all right?" Thorn asked 7. It was weird. 7 was in a sitting position, floating in the air beside Valley and Thorn as they walked. "Yeah, trying to figure out how I can float around in this bubble forever." "You're making bad jokes." So that's a good sign that you're A-okay, Thorn said. They passed the edge of the forest, the same spot where Thorn and Seven had entered the other night to save Beefy, when a wet, gravelly growl stopped them in their tracks. Stay back, the town grand moved at warp speed, pushing the witchlings behind her. Don't move. What was that? Thorn asked anxiously. If I had to guess, I'd say the cuckoo that got away, Valley whispered. The littlest one. It must have survived. A shadow grew in the forest. The group took a step back. It was a small shadow at first, maybe a squirrel or a chipmunk, but then it grew larger and larger, quicker than any natural shadow could grow, until it loomed over them. Easy, easy. We do not want to lure it into town. Rulian, follow my lead and do not... Akkometer! The town uncle cried out, and his body rushed forward toward the shadow. Rulian! Called the Gran, but it was too late. In the darkness of the forest, the town uncle cried out, and terrible ripping and crunching sounds emerged, like he was being eaten. Witchlings, stay here, cried the Gran, as she rushed into the forest. Her glittering cape lit up the air around her, and a million tiny stars swirled and grew in the dark velvet fabric. Silence hung in the air, but before they could think to speak, the Gran emerged from the cursed forest with the town uncle in her arms. It tried to eat me. The town uncle was crying as the Gran put him down. She was scowling. It didn't even scratch you, she pointed out. Let's go. Now, to my cottage. The Gran made a circle around them with her wand. Velos, she said, and as they walked, and Seven floated, Ravensgill zoomed by them. In just moments, they had reached Hollow Lane. They climbed the high steps that led to the Gran's home in record time, and Seven was grateful to be floating instead of being on foot. You'll wait here for your parents while I make sure none of you were hurt or infected, said the Gran, standing in front of the ivory-covered door to her home. They were actually going into her home, a place known as Starlight Cottage that few were allowed to enter. It was the most concentrated area of magic in all of Ravensgill, the safest place in all of Ravensgill too, Seven knew. It was the right place to recover after a monster attack. Wait, said Thorn, as the Gran's hand turned the crystal knob on the door. Where's the uncle's hat? Chapter 12, Starlight Cottage. The Gran and the uncle exchanged a look. The door to the Gran's cabin opened, and she ushered everyone inside with a wave of her hands. Quickly, she said, as Seven's bubble floated inside. The three witchlings looked up in unison as they entered the main room of Starlight Cottage. Whoa, Seven said. From the outside, Starlight Cottage looked like a 2-story townhome, covered in ivy and surrounded by flowers and a cobblestone sidewalk. Not much different from many of the homes in downtown Ravensgill. But Starlight Cottage was unlike anything Seven had ever seen. Instead of a second floor, the ceiling shot all the way up, and somehow every wall was made of sparkling glass. There was giant crystal bookcases along one wall, and like a scene out of one of Seven's dreams, black planters with every kind of plant and flower you could think of hanging from the ceilings. Seven knew the Gran's home was high above the town, but it looked even higher from inside. In a crystal case at the top of the far wall sat the most powerful weapon in all of Ravensgill, and maybe the whole 12 towns, the Celestial Sword. The gem-covered blade was sharp enough to cut through a mountain, legend said, and only the Ravensgill Grand, as the eldest of all the 12 town leaders, could use it safely. If anyone else tried to wield it, the sword would slowly burn them from the inside out. Holy rats, said Seven, staring at the sword. You can see all of Ravensgill, squealed Thorn. She ran to one of the glass walls and placed her hands against the crystal surface. Yes, it is quite impressive, the town uncle beamed as he flitted around the room preparing tea. He still looked a bit sick, but overall he seemed okay. Seven wasn't sure what the significance of his hat going missing was, but she did remember Valley telling them not to lose any items to the cuckoo. She just wasn't sure why. You should see it when there is a waning moon, the uncle said, almost wistfully. That is when you can truly appreciate its magic. Valley and Seven joined Thorn at the windows. The Grand had a perfect 360-degree view of everything from their homes to the town to the cursed forest and the boggy Crone River. They stopped on the right side of the room where the train station was. The lights of Ravenskill glittered beneath them. Smoke came from chimneys, and Seven could even see most of the mansions on the hill from this side of the house. The glass itself had a beautiful iridescent sheen, as if it had been washed in the finish of mermaid pearls. The moonlight made streaks of rainbow across Starlight Cottage, and Seven realized suddenly how late it was. I must warn you, the Grand said. This is the last time I can intercede on your behalf in such a direct way. My emotions got the better of me this time, seeing you witchlings hurt. Well, it's been a long time since there's been an impossible task so dangerous. I wish there was more I could do, but alas. At least your parents will be arriving shortly, I imagine. My parents as well? Valley asked. Your father, yes, the Grand said. Valley shifted uncomfortably, and Seven's stomach dropped. She felt guilty for not trusting Valley earlier, and now, seeing how afraid Valley looked at the mention of her father, she felt even worse. Seven wished she could know what she was thinking, or at least help her feel less afraid than she looked. Thorn reached out slowly for her hand, and Valley pulled away, shaking her head. I'm fine, she whispered. Did the cuckoo mark the uncle? Valley asked the Gran. I imagine that was the point of taking his hat, yes. I believe it meant to eat him, but when I arrived, it did the next best thing. We will not know for sure until other events occur. What events? What does mark mean? Can you let me out of here, Gran, please? Seven asked. The Gran raised one hand and sent Seven's bubble over to the large white sofas at the center of the room. With a pop, the bubble burst like it was made of soap, and Seven fell gently onto the cushiony sofa. Do not get up. I have to inspect your limbs, the Gran said. My limbs are okay. I've been floating in a bubble for the past hour. Marked for tracking? Thorn said. Aman makes anti-tracking clothing sometimes for special clients. The cuckoo either wants to find the uncle again later or find someone who's touched the hat. Oh no. Seven's hand flew to her mouth. Her mind flew back to the night of the Black Moon ceremony. The town uncle crouching close to Beefy, the baby grabbing his hat, Seven taking it from her baby brother and handing it back. What if the remaining cuckoo was still looking for Beefy? The night of the Black Moon ceremony, my baby brother touched the hat, Seven said in a daze. I did too. My goodness, said the uncle, his hand shaking. The Gran nodded, not meeting Seven's eyes. Their tracking magic is incredibly potent. All they need to do is to be near an item, touched by a mark to sense it. It's likely the cuckoo was near the edge of the forest, and when the uncle, or more specifically his hat, came closer, the cuckoo believed it was Beefy. It either did not hurt Rulian because it realized he wasn't Beefy, or because it knew I was close by and it was too hurt to fight both of us. Either way, you are incredibly lucky, and we will have to be vigilant so that you are safe. The Gran addressed the uncle, whose face had gone whiter than the snow outside. Why does the night beast want my brother? Asked Seven. He had almost been taken into the cursed forest once, and now this. Beefy is incredibly powerful for a baby. Maybe even destined for the guard, said the Gran. If the cuckoos are after him, it's so they can feed him to the night beast. The stronger the witch, the more power the monster can absorb for itself, and the more delicious it is for the night beast. Seven shivered. The cuckoos were after Beefy for his power, and the only thing standing in their way was Seven and her coven. It was all on their shoulders. I will make sure Beefy is safe, do not worry, the Gran said. Now that I think of it, Beefy being tracked should have been a help to us, said Valley. Seven narrowed her eyes. No, listen. If the cuckoos were after Beefy, That means all we had to do was wait for one to come get him, make sure it didn't, then follow it back to the night beast. That seems risky, Thorn said. And we killed 2 of them, said Seven. I killed them. I do not think the last cuckoo survived either, the Grand said. Valley shrugged. Which is why I said should've. You know, nothing about how the night beast or the cuckoos are behaving is normal. The jelly bean fish being untouched, trying to grab the uncle when it was hurt, all uncharacteristic. There is something strange about this impossible task. First, your punishment of totification. That should not be. Every task is different, every punishment as well. The cursed toads were the last to invoke the task and fail, and they were totified. So it stands to reason you should have gotten a new punishment altogether, the Gran said. Gran, said Seven, suddenly remembering something she had been wanting to ask. Do you remember the cursed toads' names? The Gran paused and stared off into the distance. It's the weirdest thing. I can't say that I do. That time was very tumultuous. There were fires spreading across the towns, and I had a lot on my plate. Between the spares, the fires, and Rulian getting sick. It was an awful time, the uncle said, his cheeks red. I am sorry I made it even harder, Gran. Do not be silly, Rulian, the Gran said, and turned back to the Witchlings. You see, when the spares of 65 were totified, Rulian was inconsolable. He was sick for a very long time, because he had tried so hard to help those spares. Within the boundaries of the impossible task, of course. It took many months before he was himself again. The impossible task is a pointless tradition, erupted Valley. Thorn gasped. Seven stared at Valley with her mouth agape, and then they both looked at the Gran, waiting for her to respond. Would she make Valley's eyebrows grow uncontrollably? Seal her lips shut with frog glue? Banish her to the cursed forest? I cannot say I disagree with you, the Gran said, but that belief will not keep it from happening. Seven blinked. You think the impossible task is pointless? The Gran smiled. I didn't create the thing, but I have no choice but to uphold it if someone invokes it. Rulian, will you show Valley and Thorn the crystal sphere? I need to speak to Seven for a moment. Seven's face went red. The uncle nodded and ushered Valley and Thorn from the room. When they were out of the room, the Gran sat beside Seven on the sofa. Seven, there is something I want to give you. The Gran rotated one hand around the other and then turned her palm up. In it sat a ceramic bird. She nodded at Seven to pick it up, and she did. She turned the bright pink and blue bird over in her hand, and it came to life suddenly, shaking its feathers and chirping a beautiful song. Seven nearly dropped it in surprise. The Gran smiled, and the bird turned to ceramic once more. This is an Av, a very special item that should only be used in the direst of circumstances. If you hold it up to your mouth and blow, it will take a message to anyone of your choosing. It will only work once, and you must be incredibly careful about it when you use it. Seven nodded, not quite sure why the Gran was giving it to her and why she'd asked the other two to leave the room in order to do it. Was the Gran playing favorites? Listen carefully now. Only other Grans or uncles can use an Av without being hurt. If you need to use it, you must be ready for the consequences. What consequences? Seven was more confused than before. Using this will drain you of all your power. If you are hurt in battle, it will likely kill you. But if you are out of options, if there is nothing else to do, and all you can hope to do is save Valley or Thorn, the Gran gestured at the Av, then use that. Why is this a secret? Why do you send Thorn and Valley away? You may tell them if you wish, but possessing this item and having to use it if the time comes is a heavy burden. Valley and Thorn are dealing with some pretty heavy burdens of their own. I did not want to add another. You've shown yourself to be capable of making hard decisions, Seven. The impossible task is not for the faint of heart, and it was invoked because of your bravery. I have a strong inkling you can handle this." "I don't know if I can do it on my own," Seven said. The Grand looked right into Seven's eyes. "You don't have to do it on your own, Seven. You are never alone. Remember that. Even if the people you love and count on can't be by your side, they are always in your heart. We will all keep a closer eye on Beefy and his magic. There are ways to keep him close to home. I know you will figure out the impossible task with Thorn and Valley. Let them help you." The uncle came back into the room with Valley and Thorn, talking loudly about the wonders of crystal spheres, and Seven hid the bird in her cloak. She felt terrible about being singled out. She didn't want to be responsible for making that kind of choice. It was a lot to put on her shoulders. "Rulian, come. We must prepare healing tonics for the witchlings to take tonight so their wounds don't get infected." A staircase appeared in the ground, and she floated down to some unknown room, the town uncle following close behind. The moment they'd left, Valley erupted. "Great! Another thing to worry about," Valley said. "We should have had stronger capes on. That would have helped," said Thorn. "What did the Grand want?" Valley asked Seven. Seven's face went red. Just to talk about the impossible task. How it was a big responsibility and blah blah." Seven wanted to sink into quicksand. She wanted her shoes to sprout into a broom and take her away. "Maybe if we weren't backed into a corner, we wouldn't have to make decisions like that. We're just kids." Valley's eyes narrowed, and she faced not just the town, but the hill, Seven realized. "What else were we supposed to do, huh? Just be okay with a future as a spare or forever witchlings with no magic? This town treats spares like they've got badger boils. Imagine if we couldn't even perform basic spells. We'd be the biggest outcast in the history of the 12 towns. I'd rather be a toad," Seven said. Valley turned around. Her face was bright red, and her hands were balled into fist. She looked angry enough to explode. Her eyes darted around the room and landed on a side table next to the sofa. She stomped over to it, picked up an expensive-looking ceramic dish that was holding some sort of candies, and flung it at the window. "Valley!" Thorn and Seven yelled in unison. The dish shattered, and the candy scattered everywhere. Seven hopped up from the sofa, but the moment she attempted to run toward Valley, her legs gave out and she fell to the floor. Oh! Thorn stood between the two witchlings now, not sure what direction to go in. "Ow!" Seven grabbed her legs and groaned, the pain as sharp as porcupine needles. She should have listened to the Gran. Thorn began to cry, which made tears stream down Seven's face too. Sorry! Valley seemed to snap out of her rage and scrambled to pick up the broken pieces of the dish, also wiping tears from her own eyes. The Gran and the uncle returned to a room in chaos, vials of tonic in their hands. "I was gone for less than 2 minutes," the Gran sighed. Thorn rushed over to help Seven back onto the sofa, and Seven watched as the Gran's eyes fell on Valley. "Valley," she said, "come with me." "It slipped. It was a mistake," Valley said quickly. "We can talk about it here or in private. It's up to you," the Gran said calmly. Valley dropped her head and followed the Gran downstairs. Seven desperately wanted to listen to what was going on. She was sure the Gran would ask Valley if she was okay or if there were troubles at home. Whenever a witch got in trouble at their school, that was one of the questions they asked, and Seven knew that firsthand. Her run-ins with Valley hadn't come without the occasional visit to the head Supreme's office. "I hope Valley is okay," Seven said. Then her hand flew to her mouth. Thorn smiled and nodded. "Might as well stop pretending you aren't friends already." Whoa! I wouldn't take it that far. Seven held her hands up. "We're not friends. Not even close." Thorn grabbed a pillow from the Grand sofa and threw it at Seven. "Do you know how hard it is trying to make sure the two of you don't start fighting all the time? I'm very sleepy, Seven. You goats tire me out. But lately, it's just been nice. The air feels less sticky and heavy now that you're starting to get along. Don't mess it up." Thorn smoothed her skirt, not looking at Seven, but not appearing afraid or shy either. Seven smirked. Thorn was different than she'd first thought. Or maybe she was changing. But Seven liked this side of her. Thorn should stand up to her and Valley. They could be butt-toads sometimes. And I hope she is okay too, Thorn said. Seven nodded. Friend or not, she was really worried about Valley. That night in her room, Seven reinforced the wards her parents had helped her construct at her window. Akarazar, she whispered as she held her hands up towards the window, and a gold light sealed her room. Seven flopped onto her bed and hugged a pillow, thinking of the very long day she'd just had. It was after midnight, and she still couldn't sleep. Seven took the ceramic bird from the bedside table and turned it over in her hand. The Gran had assured her Beefy would be safe, but if the cuckoo was tracking her and she was home, then that meant not just Beefy, but her parents too would be in harm's way. She eyed Valley's copy of the latest Witches of Heartbreak Cove. She was itching to read it, and she really needed a distraction. But somehow, she couldn't even stomach fun right now. Instead, she grabbed her phone from her nightstand. Why not try for a little rejection instead? She said to herself cheerily, and typed out another message to Poppy. Hey, Poppy. Still alive? Seven bit her lip as she stared at her phone screen, nerves crawling like a billion bugs all over her skin. The phone in their kitchen rang its loud trill, and Seven's heart dropped. Late phone calls always made her think of bad news. When her own Gran had passed, it had come with a phone call in the middle of the night. Then Seven's portaphone lit up and Seven jumped, her heart racing at what Poppy might say. But it was Valley. Are you awake? What happened? Seven wrote back. They took the town uncle. The cuckoo came for him. He's gone. And this is where we will stop for today. The next chapter is chapter 13, The Night Beast Cave. Until next time, everyone.